Welcome, everybody. All right, today we're talking about how to think like a wealthy person. You know, through the fabric and tapestry of American culture, there's this mythology or a cult of a millionaire. And it originated in France, actually. And it was back in the early 1800s, about, 1825, 26. It was rarely used in the United States until the late 19th century, but the word millionaire was first used in America in a newspaper obituary for Pierre Lorillard I, which was the founder of the tobacco empire. And he was a millionaire, Lorillard. And he was known because he really wanted to create something that people could chew and not swallow. And there were only three millionaires in the United States in 1861. But it was a very different story a century later. There were about 100,000 millionaires in the country in 1961 versus 27,000 in 1953. And there's enough of these millionaires to suggest that wealthy compromised a legitimate subculture. And with many rich Americans and many, many more wanting to become one, efforts were made to try to figure out if there was a common defining psychological trait of the tremendously wealthy, and if so, what was it? And there was a study back in 1961, six millionaires, I think John Paul Getty, Simon Marx, Aristotle Onassis, Alfred Krupp, which was an industrialist, and Charles Clore, which is a takeover artist, a textile tycoon from France named Marcel Boussac, and Gernwy, I don't know this one, Gernwy Reese found only one strong in commonality, an inclination to roll the dice, and after winning a hand or two, the guts to lay it all on the final bet. And it's the willingness to accept a huge risk that made these people millionaires. And that psychologically distinguishes the millionaire. And truthfully, if you really think about it, the psychology that works best for people who are wealthy is they believe in themselves. They have faith in themselves. They have faith in their intellect. They have faith in their purpose. They have faith in their ideas. They have faith in their life. And faith works a heck of a lot better than fear. However, most people operate off of fear-based motives. The fear of loss, the fear of having nothing. People who operate out of faith, which is what it takes to live in the jungle, are people who trust themselves that they will make it no matter what. And then there was this other book that was written back in 61, New Millionaires and How They Made Their Fortunes. And it had a different super rich theory. Extreme self-confidence. Some people would call that cocky. However, if you think about it and you had to have a surgeon to fix your heart, would you want them to be self-confident or would you want them to be insecure? You want people who are self-confident, not that they are overly self-confident, but they are experts in what they do. That's what we need. And people that are millionaires are very self-confident that they know how to get things done. Other factors that matter quite a bit when it came to making a fortune is your place of birth, how much money your father made, even education level were of little or no importance. Those things were not a factor as much to the volumes and volumes and volumes of millionaires, other than the idea that these people believed in themselves. These people believed in their ideas. These people understood how people operate and what people need. They know how to overcome objections because they know the value of their thoughts and their ideas. And even if they fail, they still know the value of what it can bring. And they work on creating a better opportunity to get to that value. According to a growing number of people who are experts, Many children of privilege had a much different psychological profile. The first, poor little rich kid syndrome was diagnosed in the 70s. And its proponents like Burton Wixton, which wrote Children of the Rich, argued that a golden ghetto dwelled within American wealth culture. Narcissistic, self-centered, shallow, little waifs that were just as deprived as kids growing up in utter poverty, treating them, they were labeled emotional zombies. What they were lacking was the emotional connection to themselves and the emotional belief that they could do great things. It was the expectations that they would do great things that turned them into little waifs and kids that thought in terms of poverty because they were expected to measure up to what their parents created. And what you have to understand is if you're going to raise another generation of kids who have more than what you had, you have to believe in them and you have to teach them to believe in themselves. And that doesn't mean you manage every single decision that they ever make. It means you celebrate their strengths and you accent their strengths and you build their childhood based on their strengths and you build on them. And if their strengths is networking with other people, maybe that is a strength at 13 to 14 to 15 years old that you want to build on because that may be their survival mechanism and their ability to get wealthy later on in their lives. In the 1980s, some social critics and psychologists began to argue that children of privilege often suffered from what one of them cleverly termed as affluenza, catching this affliction, the dark side of too much of much. And it's a fairly predictable path. And what we're seeing nowadays is a bunch of Gen Z idiots living at home with their parents who save money for retirement and now are funding their kids' lives, who have no goals, who have no dreams, but think that everything should come to them free, given to them, and then they enter politics and they want the whole government and everybody that pays taxes to give them everything for free, including people that come from all over the world that have had nothing in their life and they come here and they get free things from our government. That's the Gen Z thought because they never had to earn a damn thing in their life and they have no unique thoughts in their brain. They just want free, free, free everything because they are worthless as tits on a boar hog. However, there are a few of them, hopefully, that will grow beyond that and realize after they spend all their parents' money that they run out of money and then they hit a wall and hopefully change will happen. However, some people were so good at saving money that they can live on to the next generation and the next generation. And hopefully they all poop out after that and croak off. And then we have democracy again. But what we really have to understand is the wild buying spree, the clothing at first, and soon escalating to bigger ticket items like first class seats, purchased at the airport before the next plane to paradise leaves. The last and most dangerous phase is a gradual loss of identity, general aimlessness. Experts often see that often associated with the consumption of alcohol and drugs. And it just builds on itself because they have no purpose in their life beyond themselves. What is a purpose driven life? A purpose driven life and people's wealth derives from the idea that it's not about you, it's about what you create and what you have that people need. That's how people create wealth. If you're a worthless, tit sucking little 30-year-old living in the basement of your parents, there's a really good chance that you have very little motive beyond yourself, except for you and your stupid video games and all your little buddies that like to cuss at each other and corrupt our children. But the bottom line is, as you sit there and eat your Doritos and gain your 400 pounds, there's a good chance that your wall is going to get hit and eventually you're going to have to move on with your life, hopefully after your parents run out of their money. You know, there's a lot of people. There's people that are hedge funders. They began to rule back in the 2000s. They spread between the mega haves and the mega have-a-lots, and they would grow into this huge thing because what they learned how to play was the stock market, and what they learned is a thing called passive income. Now, passive income is a very important thing. And the minute that you get smart enough to learn how to create passive income, you're going to have the opportunity to provide for yourself a very comfortable, wealthy life. But that doesn't mean your psychology is going to be good, because there's a lot of very unhappy rich people who influence how we operate in this world, who have the money to influence politicians, who go into politics, and they're miserably stupid, unhappy people with lots of money determining the future of the human race. And because we all live in a money driven economy, and money is what dictates where thoughts go, what happens is we have a very corrupted culture that loves money more than people. And what we really need is to love people and use money to make people's lives better and make people more productive. But the bottom line is they still have to be accountable for their life. And that is what this generation is not learning, is to be accountable for your life. And now they're creating children that don't take accountability for their life, and they all want everything on a silver platter to be served by a robot created by Elon Musk. Rich people aren't afraid to fund their future from other people's pockets. If they come up with a great idea that they're unable to finance, they proceed to use other people's money to make it happen. Rich people know not being solvent enough to personally afford something is not relevant. The real question is the worth buying and investing in and pursuing? Because if it is, other people will get on board that may have more resources than I do. That's how Elon Musk made his money. He teamed up with very wealthy ideas, demonstrated really good ideas, and got them excited about it, and now he's going to be the first trillionaire. All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back, and we're going to talk more about how people can create and think like a wealthy person. So come back. Welcome back, everybody. All right, the other issue that financially wealthy people don't they think like is, if they're going to borrow money, they're going to borrow money towards an idea that's going to multiply money. What people have is an addiction to credit cards and debt. And what they want to fund is a life that makes them look like they're wealthy, but they're not. And so what they do is they have their exotic trips that they take, and they have their exotic things that they buy, and they have their exotic homes that they have. They have their exotic lives in exotic cities and living, having their children in exotic schools. And they set themselves up because they're middle class people trying to live a rich life. But what they do is they sell their soul by getting credit cards and getting debt and debt and debt. And that is not how you think like a wealthy person. A wealthy person uses money to make money. That is what distinguishes them. They don't borrow money to buy stupid things. They borrow money to make money. That is the only reason a human being should borrow money. No one would ever strike it rich or live their dreams without huge expectations. There's a lot of ancient wisdom that says you can get what you expect, yet many people decide to limit their lives to middle class, mediocre, in an effort to protect themselves from failure. The fear of failure. Mediocrity is everywhere. There are so many mediocre potential billionaires, millionaires in this world. There's so many mediocre people who are great geniuses who could invent things and change the world that never will, because they're worthless as can be, because their parents never instilled motivation in them, and they never hit a wall because their parents never allowed them to. It's called a paradox. Give people what they want until they finally hit the wall. That's when they learn. They hit the wall, they have no money, they have no resources, and they're either going to turn into their integrity, which is to be a criminal, or they're going to go out and take their mind and turn it into something great. Rich people think of business, life, earning as a game, and it's a game they love to win. And this is the reason millionaires and billionaires still go to work every day chasing their next success. Money to these people is no more than a gauge that tells them when they have achieved their latest target. And that is what so many people find so offensive about our current president. He is a multi-billionaire. Why? Because everything is a game to win. And you know who the winner is now? The winner is our country. However, there's idiots out there, the dumb Gen Zers, who will vote for the communists because they think that's the way to live. And communists is pretty a miserable life because in the end, if you look at China and you look at even countries that are socialist like Japan and Vietnam and Russia, guess what? You're not going to find disabled kids living in those cultures because they're going to be killed because they don't fit and they can't participate. And so there's great sacrifices to stupidity like communism because if you don't fit in the box and you don't support the people that are on top and make them the multi-billionaires that they want to be, even though they're pathetically stupid people, what happens is you suffer. But people go to college and they go to their nice little Harvard and they graduate from their little Yales and they think they're so freaking smart. But the problem is they're so smart that they have no common sense because they like to buy their own stupid hypotheses. And people that buy their own stupid hypotheses without testing them are called politicians. Rich people consider money as their greatest ally and their greatest friend. It is a friend that has the power to end sleepless nights of worry, end physical pain, and can save their life. Wealthy people believe money can solve problems and purchase a peace of mind. The middle class sees money as never-ending necessary evil that must endure as a part of life. So money can either be a great curse or it could be a wonderful game to win. That's why Monopoly is such a popular game, because it teaches you how to think like a millionaire. The greatest ones are operating at a level of consciousness where fear doesn't exist. At this level of thought, anything seems possible. Every dream that seems crazy to the masses looks surprisingly doable. To operate at that level, you have to be willing to leave your comfort zone and operate off of faith. Faith above fear. Faith is where you have to land if you're going to be someone successful in this life. And the first place you have to have faith is in God and yourself. World-class thinkers learn early on becoming a millionaire isn't easy, and the need for comfort can be devastating. They learn to be comfortable with operating in a state of ongoing uncertainty. That's what it takes to be a millionaire. Operating in uncertainty, but believing in yourself. The rich believe that success, fulfillment, and happiness are the natural order of existence, and that there will be failure, but with failure will be lessons. And that's okay because I'm smart enough to endure it and get through it because I know my value and I know the value of what I'm creating and selling. This single belief drives the greatest ones to behave in ways that virtually guarantee their success. But on the flip side, the middle class struggles because they expect to be they expect to get money. They expect everything to come to them. They expect themselves to be great. Well, many people are great in their mind, but they're not great in their ability and their motivation. The masses think they aren't worthy of great wealth. Who am I? They ask themselves to become a millionaire. Well, If you thought like a millionaire and changed how you think, you probably would become one. But that means you would have to use money as a game and money as a commodity that you value. What are the real foundations of success? Education has less importance than entrepreneurial thinking. So, all of these stupid idiots that go out there and get their social work degrees and their business degrees and their general degrees in art history or whatever the heck you're going to get your spend 250, 300, $400,000 at some high powered school. Well, if you don't have an entrepreneurial mind, you're going to spend the most of your life paying for the college and then paying for your spouse's college and then paying for your kids' college, and all of it leading to mediocrity. You have to think like an entrepreneur, but you have to live in a country that celebrates entrepreneurs because communism does not do that. More than half of our country, the Democratic Party, are lunatics. Idiots, complete and utter psychopaths who believe that everybody should be giving to each other and everybody should be working on an equal basis. Well, not everybody is intelligent and not everybody is motivated. Not everybody has much to offer. And the truth is, people will resonate and go to the lowest common denominator, what the other person is doing to make the same amount of money they are. That's how humans work. If you don't have a democracy, you don't evolve, which is what we saw with Biden and all his little lunatics and their auto pins running our country. There are masses of books on how to get rich, but most of them are straightforward, how-to books that readers should approach with a degree of skepticism, because what it doesn't tell you is how to overcome objections and how to believe in yourself and how to have faith in yourself and how to be able to test your hypothesis without just believing your hypothesis is correct. Science research has provided very few insights into the subject of getting rich. Sociologists and economists have been more interested in inequality research, poverty research, than they have been of the genesis of wealth on a personal level, even though many people are very interested. Stocks are not the answer. Entrepreneurship is on how to get rich. That means you have a unique idea. What's interesting is people have about 100 thoughts in a day. If one of them is a unique thought, you're an absolute genius. However, many people manufacture how to get rich and do things on how to get rich, but they do that in a very unique way. And what you have to study is not what they did to get rich, but what it took as a person to get rich too. If you study the formula to get rich, that's great, but what you have to understand is the motivator and what it takes. And sometimes you can work smarter than they did. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. What you have to understand is what works and what doesn't, and then what it takes to make it happen and to endure and to stay the course, to be resilient. Because people who maintain their wealth are resilient people. They don't have to be successful every time. They learn from their failures. They're not afraid of it. You know, the key to finding the most important prerequisite for becoming wealthy, with the exception of inheritance, is self-employment, working as a freelancer, more so an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship in particular is a guarantor of very high wealth. Average wealth increases enormously with entrepreneurship. On the average, households that become rich in this way are worth 2.5 euros, which is not equivalent to dollars. That would be more dollars, more than households with entrepreneurship that is not a factor. Now, that is from a study coming out of Europe. Employees rarely become rich, but inheritance does play a role. But in more than half of the studies, rich households, self-employment was more relevant than inheritance. So what you have to understand is in this country, in the United States, if you're going to be a millionaire, you need to do it in this lifetime if you want to be of the majority. If you're going to be the ones that are handed down your millions of dollars, well, if you want to pass that on from generation to generation, you better get good and respectful of managing money and figure out what your purpose in life is. Because if you don't, you're probably just sitting here wasting time and wasting the money. Why don't you go out and buy your little mediocre house and live your little mediocre life and stick your penis or vagina in whatever you have to do to make yourself happy? And if that's all you are, live in that and stop corrupting the world with your stupid ideas. Widely published lists of rich people in the world provides ample confirmation to the idea that people are entrepreneurial, that are successful with their money. The richest people are owners and founders of large corporations or the heirs of those corporations who vest in those corporations. If you vest your family name in a corporation, there's a good chance that the family is going to rally around the corporation that you create and that you're not going to just depend on the stupid oldest child to get out there in the world, because if they don't have the intelligence and they don't have the motivation, hanging your hat on the oldest child is a really dumb thing to do. What you want to do is build an army of people behind your ideas, which hopefully is your employees like Michael Dell did, or the other ideas building it from your family. Background and education is less important. Research has fairly concluded that largely neglected to investigate the personal traits that play such an important role in becoming rich, which is the subject of even many doctoral dissertations. But what we want to understand is self-made millionaires have a net worth on the average these days of between 30 million and $1 billion. They are significantly richer than millionaires surveyed in the category of people who inherited money and people who are trying to just earn the money. Entrepreneurs, that's the key. Having an entrepreneurial spirit is the key if you want to have a sustaining multimillionaire strategy. People who are taught to respect money and taught to use money to place bets that they believe are good bets, are substantial bets, not an act of a manic bipolar lunatic, but somebody who places a strategic bet on their ideas, are people that often are going to come out on top. Now, can they fail over and over again? Of course they can. Can they place a really big bet and lose it the first time? Of course they can. But if they're the type of person that is resilient enough to learn from how they failed, there's a really good chance that that person is going to come back at some point and be even more successful than other entrepreneurs in their field because they learn to innovate. Now, what is the difference between an inventor and an innovator? Well, the vast majority of people in this world, 99.5% at least, are innovators. They take other people's ideas, much like the Romans, much like the Japanese. They'll take other people's ideas, and instead of inventing them, they make them into better ideas. They innovate. That's what most people do to make and be entrepreneurs. They innovate other ideas that people have invented and gradually turn them into something greater and greater and greater and give more and more potential. Other people are inventors. Now, some people are inventors and innovators. They will invent an idea, they will copyright their idea, and then they will innovate their own idea. That's what Elon Musk does. That's why he's so successful. He gets the kernel of an idea, he develops the idea, he cultivates the idea into something real, and then he innovates the idea after that. And then he mass produces it after that. That's called genius. That is called an innovator and an inventor all at the same time. And to get both packages in one person is very rare. But I would tell you, if you want to think like the average wealthy person, you learn how to innovate ideas and turn them into something greater. You know, oftentimes entrepreneurs think against the current, or they go with the current and make the current better. I used to work for a gentleman. His name was Paul Flum in St. Louis, and Paul Flum was a genius. But Paul Flum was a Fuller Brush salesman, door to door, before he was a genius. He was a genius in this way. He looked in the supermarkets and he saw that the 2 liter bottles, nobody can reach them on the top shelf. And so therefore the soft drink suppliers were not selling the 2 liter bottles like they needed to. And what made the 2 liter bottles sell was him inventing gravity racks that once people pulled the first 2 liter bottle, the next one would roll down to the front row, and you'd be able to access that instead of having to reach to the far back of the top shelf in the grocery store, because nobody would want to buy those 2 liter bottles that were the back of the rack in the grocery store at the top. So the innovation was gravity racks, and those made their way into the convenience stores. And he innovated that idea and created that idea, invented that idea, manufactured that idea, and turned himself into about $33 million a year business, which is now into the multi-million dollar, multi hundreds of millions, if not billion-dollar business for the soft drink industry. Gut feeling is more important than analytical skills. Overwhelmingly, the super rich explained that their decisions were based far more on the gut feeling than considered analysis. Even those who do rely more on analytical decision making approaches, they listen to their gut instinct 20 to 40% of the time. And by way of comparison, total population, the proportion of those who said they make decisions based on reason outweighs by far the proportion of those who say they make decisions based on a feeling. Gut feeling is a product of implicit learning, flashes of insight, and triggered by the recognition of a pattern. An awareness, in turn, that results in the experience gathered over a whole lot of years. You know, dealing with setbacks is also what rich people share a fundamental belief that the blame for setbacks and crisis should not be sought in external circumstances or in other people, but in themselves. The deal is if you're going to innovate an idea, there's a good chance that other people are going to innovate what you innovated. So if you're just going to sit with what you created, you're probably going to kill your business. You've got to keep evolving and evolving and evolving, because when you create an idea that works, other people are going to latch onto that idea and try to make the same amount of money that you made. All right, we're going to take another break and we're going to come right back. Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about how to think like a wealthy person. Every billionaire has their own way of building sustained wealth. Their success doesn't come from luck alone. It's built on strategic financial management, strong discipline, surrounding themselves with people who believe in their ideas, people who believe in their own ideas, and supporting those people that believe in their own ideas, and even providing the resources for people who believe in really good ideas and making them even better. Their mindset and habits form the foundation of sustainable wealth growth. You know, interestingly, many of the same principles can be applied to anyone, including you. By understanding and emulating billionaires' smart approaches, you can start building a solid financial foundation. You first of all, there's some rules to follow. Don't rely on a single source of income. You want to have multiple creeks. You may have a river, but you want to have multiple diverse creeks. Billionaires never depend on one source of income. They understand that relying on a single stream is risky and seasonal, and the seasons may run out. In addition to running their core business, they also invest in various financial instruments like stocks, mutual funds, property, bonds. By investing in bonds, investors can have a steady form of regular income and payments, and they develop a safe and secure form of a passive income, and that helps for their portfolio to be diverse. They also adopt a rich wealth mindset. And this mindset is a cornerstone of a wealth creation. Billionaires view money not merely as a tool for spending, but as a resource to create more value and more opportunity. They focus on making their money work for them. One way to apply that mindset is investing in low risk yet profitable assets like growth bonds, fixed interest, defined maturities. These instruments provide predictable returns, and it allows investors to plan their wealth growth more confidently because the money will continue to come in. They also tend to prioritize long-term investments over short-term consumption. They know that savings alone cannot outpace inflation. And this is where bonds come in because they're a smart solution. They offer higher yields than time deposits of maintaining low risk. They're issued by the government, so that gives some guarantees. They take small steps with a big impact. Wealth isn't built overnight. Billionaires start small but stay consistent, saving part of their income, investing regularly, and continually learning about financial markets. If you're one of these idiots that spends all your money on your credit card debt, your mortgage, your cars, your going out, your belly, your stupid drinking and drugs, and all your dumb habits, you're probably not going to be a wealthy person because you're not putting the money away that you need to put away to not just retire, but to actually be safe and connected and concerned and available and have the kind of things that you're building a life where you have possibilities. Wealth is a simple step in setting your mindset towards growth, using money to grow a better life. It allows you to purchase bonds are great. You can do that, but you also have to have long-term goals. And the goals need to include a variety of things: retirement savings, children's education, financial freedom, financial having cash flow, and then having other things that are more solid, derived income that you can count on. You also want to focus on results, and that's what billionaires don't get distracted by short-term market trends where things go down. They focus on consistent, measurable outcomes. This also applies to investing. Not all investments need to carry high risk or deliver strong returns. However, you also need to evaluate your finances regularly. That's what billionaires do. They continue to reevaluate: how is my money spent? How are my returns? What can I do to make this better? And they keep hedging their bets. You also have to understand that using guarantees, especially guarantees of the government, guarantees of investors, is a very good idea because when you're taking risk, you don't want to take all of the risk. You want to be diverse. You want to provide balance between risk and return in your investment portfolio. The problem is that people get greedy. Once they start making money, they want to make more and more money, which is great. But what you want to understand is you want to secure how your money comes in. And that comes from diversity, and that may come from bringing other people in to make money too, so that you can solidify your cash flow. Developing the right mindset, investing with discipline, choosing safe yet profitable instruments is a huge liability. It's a huge strength in your corner. Competitive rates and researching what competitive rates look like is very big, but also researching what businesses are becoming successful and how are these businesses becoming successful. And if you're going to invest in other businesses that you don't know, you need to research them and find out what kind of commodities they have and how they're growing their commodities and what the market in the future is looking like. If you're thinking about investing in something that's AI oriented, knowing that AI is going to solidify a field like medical field, the medical field is going to be riddled with AI. AI is eventually going to be diagnosing people rather than doctors. That's going to be a great thing with all these stupid ass woke people that graduated from medical school. Who needs that crap? We need to have something that actually can do the job. AI is a heck of a lot better than some idiot standing in an emergency room making a guess after they just made the wrong guess on the past five people. Then there's things like time wealth, the ability to be intentional with your time, have the freedom to choose how, when, and with whom to spend it. But if you're a fear oriented person, you're going to always make the safest possible, most pragmatic bets. Well, you may gain money, that's great, but you're probably not going to make a lot of money. Then there's social wealth, deep, meaningful connections with a close circle of people, spreading the wealth out to those people and involving their minds, their motivations, their support behind good ideas. And then there's also mental wealth, cultivating an inner life of clarity, growth, curiosity through a sense of purpose and resilience. If you've got a very innovative, smart person that's addicted to drugs or alcohol, probably not a good bet. It's great that they're really smart, but there's also a chance that they're going to lose their freaking mind and stop making good bets on themselves because they obviously have a problem with their own self-esteem because they have a problem with alcohol or drugs. So, therefore, they're not a safe bet. So, you don't want to match your wealth up with idiots. Having financial resources to support, these pillars, you have to talk about, does this person that I'm working with work well with time? Do they work well with social wealth? Do they work well with mental health? Do they have good physical? Do they have good financials? You want well-rounded people when you're involving investing. The other thing is the people with high wealth believe in high salaries as the key of becoming wealthy. While a good income is helpful, true wealth comes from ownership, and that means making other people owners. I mentioned Michael Dell earlier because what made him a multi-billionaire was not only that he had a product that competed with IBM, but he also invested in marketing people to start his business and paid them more than his own profits. He paid the marketing people who came from IBM to market his product and use their ability to influence the market to make his product more valuable. And he also taught them to believe in his product by giving them heavy amounts of income, heavy amounts of profitability in his business. And by doing that, he secured his own income. And then he made all people that he hired a part of the company. That was very smart. A smart business you're passionate about. That's even better. Look for job opportunities that offer stock options or equity bonuses, people that are Amazon or slave labor because their income is tied directly to how the business succeeds. You also want to make sure that people own property. The home may not always be the best investment, especially if it doesn't generate income. However, many wealthy people invest in property to build wealth because if you invest in property in the right locations, in the right places, that is going to grow. Rental properties can be a great way to diversify your investments. With rental income, it covers the mortgage and other expenses. The goal is for the property to pay for itself and help reduce your mortgage through tenant payments. You can also, rent it out as, the Airbnbs. Airbnbs make a lot of money Why do they make a lot of money? Because the people that choose the right locations with the right kind of property, and then they choose people who care about managing the property properly and maintaining it well so that there's good churn of people who respect the property and who pay fines when they torture and harm the property. That is a very smart business. But you have to calculate to ensure that rent covers mortgage and expenses. It's really important maybe to hire an agent who handles Airbnbs or handles renting properties so that you can vet the right people to move into the property. So it may be that you lose money on one side of it, but then you gain a renter who respects your property on the other side, and you gain a contract that works better to maintain your property on the other side. Many people make the mistake of selling their investments in a panic when the market drops, like we're going to see probably in the next 5 or 6 years, maybe before that. Wealthy people usually think long term. They let their investments grow over time, sometimes for a lot of years. So when the market fluctuates, which it always does, they stick to their plan rather than making hasty decisions. A lot of people commit suicide when the market dies because they made stupid, short term, greedy decisions and it falls out from under them. You can't put all your money in one stream. That will not make you a sustainably wealthy person. They focus on investing over saving. Savings accounts are helpful for emergencies, for short-term needs like maybe the next 3 months. However, if you want your money to grow, you need to invest. So wealthy people understand that. And saving is safe, but they want to invest in people. They want to invest in ideas. They want to invest in innovation. They want to invest in things that people need. They want to see the value of what they have and what people need and match them up and alert those people that I know you need this and I have this. That's a very important thing. But you have to, if you're going to be wealthy, you have to be cautious with anything that claims to offer a significant returns too quickly. A lot of people invested foolishly in a thing called open AI, which was a Ponzi scheme and is a Ponzi scheme and always will be a Ponzi scheme where it makes it look like you're making a fortune and they know something. AI is tracking something and sniffing out investments all over the place, and you're making money, hundreds of thousands of dollars within months, and you become a millionaire within a year. And, well, I've seen people do that. I've known people done that. I watched it on television. I saw it on the news. No, it's a Ponzi scheme. If it's making money fast, it is not a wealthy strategy. It is an idiot strategy where you are trying to be something bigger than what you really are. Focus on investing for retirement, property, long-term goals. That's what billionaires focus on. Long-term wealth. Get rich quick schemes are appealing, but truly wealthy people know that real wealth takes time to build. They research their options thoroughly and stay patient. And yes, sometimes they strike it rich. Maybe they invest in a movie that happens to just take off and people go crazy about the movie. And maybe they invested very little money, but the movie turns out to have good actors and a good script and it takes off and now everybody's wanting to buy into it. That's a great thing if you're that kind of person. But you have to understand that you have to surround yourself with highly talented, highly committed people when you're investing in a venture that involves other people. You need to pay them well and you need to expect a good result, and they need to have buy-in on the result also. Think about what adds real value to your life. Family trips, hobbies, giving to charity. These are very important things to think about. If you want to make poor people rich, then learn a strategy that teaches them how to be entrepreneurs, because those are the people that are going to have sustaining wealth in our future. Entrepreneurs, because the idiots that are getting wealth from their parents, that little vein is going to run out, including all the taxpayer money that these little Gen Zers as politicians want to become. They want to steal all the money they can, and then it all runs out, and then they're going to steal all the poor people's money. If you want to be rich in America in your life, if you want to be a wealthy person, don't live in a communist country. Live in a country that allows your ideas to flow and you to be rewarded by them and hard work to be respected. Remember this, anything hard makes your life easier. And making yourself a wealthy person is a job, it's hard work. Believing in yourself is faith based. That's how life expands. That's how we evolve. Faith based philosophy, not fear based. Thanks for listening. I love hearing from you. You can do that on our webpage at voiceamericamedia.com, libsyn.com, Dr. Gary Bell's Absurd Psychology. Now remember, by the way you spend money, you are meant to be rich, especially if you got credit cards. Have you ever tried to pay bills with a hug? You know what keeps people poor is not knowing how to use their money. Maybe that's something you have to figure out. Thanks for listening, everybody.